Rachel didn't believe in fate. But on that rainy Tuesday morning, something made her look up. It was just after 7 a.m, and the diner smelled like burnt coffee and maple syrup, the way it always did at that hour. She had just finished restocking creamers at table 5 when the front door creaked open. The sound didn't turn any heads, nothing unusual. But still, something about it pulled her eyes toward the entrance. A boy walked in, no more than 10 years old, his hoodie soaked through, backpack slouched on one shoulder like it was twice his weight, and his eyes, quiet, calculating, too old for his face. He didn't speak, just slipped into the booth in the back, the one tucked against the window, then opened a tattered copy of a children's novel and buried himself in it like he'd been doing it for years. Rachel didn't rush over, she watched. A few minutes passed, and when no order came, she wiped her hands on her apron and walked to his table. She didn't ask what he wanted, just placed a towel in front of him and said, "Dry off, sweetheart." Her voice was the same one she used with lonely truckers and old men who ordered coffee just to feel seen. The boy didn't smile, just nodded barely. Then, almost under his breath, came the quietest request she'd heard all morning. "Water, please." Rachel brought him a tall glass and added a paper straw, even though she knew he probably wouldn't care. That was it. The next morning he came back, same time, same seat, same request. Then the next day, and the one after that. Always 7:15, always just water, always alone. He never ordered food. But he noticed it. The steam from the pancake stack 2 tables over. The soft crunch when someone bit into toast. The sizzle from the kitchen when bacon hit the grill. His eyes followed the plates like someone who remembered the smell of breakfast but hadn't felt it in a while. Rachel noticed too. On the 5th day she walked over with a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. "Oh," she said, pretending to be flustered. "Kitchen made an extra by mistake. Hate to waste it. You mind?" The boy stared, his shoulders stiff. His fingers fidgeted on the table's edge like he wasn't sure what to do. Then slowly, carefully, he reached for the fork. 10 minutes later, the plate was clean. When she came to pick it up, he didn't lift his head. But just as she turned to leave, she heard a whisper so soft it nearly disappeared into the clink of silverware around them. "Thank you." Rachel didn't say anything, just nodded quietly and walked away. That's how it started. No big moment, no dramatic plea, just a kid trying not to be noticed. And a waitress who'd once been hungry enough to recognise what that silence really meant. By the 2nd week, Rachel had learned his routine. Every morning, rain or shine, he walked through that door at exactly 7:15. Not 7:10, not 7:20, 7:15. He always carried the same oversized backpack, wore the same scuffed-up sneakers, and sat in the same corner booth without saying a word to anyone. She never asked where he came from, but she noticed the damp cuffs of his jeans when it rained, and how his sleeves were sometimes rolled to hide a missing button. She noticed how he glanced at the front door every few minutes, like he was keeping track of something, or someone. Rachel didn't push, she just started leaving a plate on the table before he even ordered anything, always with the same story. "Cook messed up again," she'd say casually. "Made one too many." The boy never questioned it. He just nodded once, quietly, then ate like the food might vanish if he looked away too long. Scrambled eggs on Tuesday, a short stack of pancakes on Wednesday, oatmeal with brown sugar on Thursday. On Friday she slipped in a side of bacon, not because he asked, because he smiled just slightly the first time she did. It became their ritual, a silent kind of understanding. Rachel never asked his name, he never offered it. But every morning, for those quiet 30 minutes before school, they shared something that didn't need words. Of course, people started noticing. Diners who came in every morning for their coffee and gossip began to whisper. Some were gentle about it, others, not so much. "You feeding strays now?" Harold asked one day, smirking over his 3rd refill of black coffee. "Kid even pay for that?" Rachel didn't look up from wiping the counter. "He's just hungry," she said softly. Kathy, who worked the grill, wasn't cruel, but she was practical. She pulled Rachel aside after the shift one morning and spoke in that dry, straight-shooting tone she used when the truth wasn't going to be kind. "You got a good heart," she said, "but kids like that, they come and go. You give too much, they disappear, and it'll hurt." Rachel nodded. She didn't argue. But what she didn't say was that it already hurt, seeing someone that small try so hard to stay invisible. Because she remembered what it was like. She remembered being 11 sitting at the back of a classroom with a growling stomach, hoping no one could hear it. She remembered counting change just to buy half a sandwich at the gas station and pretending it was enough. And most of all, she remembered how long it took to stop feeling ashamed of needing help. So no, she didn't need his name or his story. She just needed to know he wasn't going to school hungry. That weekend, she skipped her usual thrift store trip and set aside part of her tip jar to buy a box of granola bars and a couple of clean thermoses. She packed one each morning with warm milk or juice and handed it to him as casually as the plate. Extra order, again. He never protested, never said much. But one morning, as he slipped the thermos into his backpack, he paused. "Thanks," he said. Not whispered this time, not mumbled. Just said it like a real thank you. Rachel gave him a small smile. "Don't mention it." And for a second, just a second, the boy looked her in the eye. That's when she knew. He was starting to trust her. By the third week, Rachel had memorised the rhythm of his mornings better than her own. He'd come in exactly 2 minutes after the school bus passed the diner without stopping, always on foot, always quiet, and always carrying that beat-up backpack like it held more than just books, like it carried the weight of the world. She never asked where he was walking from, or why he didn't take the bus. But she noticed how his socks were sometimes mismatched, how the knees of his jeans had been sewn up by hand, how once, when she reached to adjust a napkin that had fallen, he flinched before catching himself. Whatever his story was, it wasn't a light one. Still, Rachel didn't pry. Instead, she brought him warm food, sat the plate down without fanfare. Some mornings it was French toast with cinnamon and powdered sugar. Other times it was a cheese omelette she'd asked the cook to make accidentally. She rotated the meals just enough to keep it from being obvious, like she was feeding a kid who didn't exist on the books. It worked, until the morning her manager noticed. Mark wasn't a bad guy, just a numbers guy. He pulled Rachel into the back storage room after the rush had slowed, arms crossed over his chest, expression tight. "You giving food away again?" he asked, like he already knew the answer. Rachel didn't deny it. "I pay for it out of my tips," she said calmly. Mark frowned. "That's not the point." "Then what is?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's not good optics, okay? Customers see you playing charity, they start thinking we've got some kind of soup kitchen going on. Or worse, they start asking for free food too." Rachel didn't flinch. "He's just a kid. A kid you don't even know." She hesitated. "I don't need to." For a moment, Mark didn't say anything, just looked at her like he was trying to figure out whether this was a fight worth having. Then he sighed. "Fine," he muttered. "You keep covering it, it's on you. But if it starts affecting your work, or if he causes any trouble, it stops. Understood?" Rachel nodded. "Understood." And that was that. No pink slip, no argument. Just a line in the sand. She went back to work, with relief blooming quietly in her chest, but also with a deeper resolve. From that day forward, she started keeping better track of her tips, cutting back on the little things, a coffee from the gas station, a movie rental on weekends. The money she once saved up for a new winter coat now went into feeding someone else's child. Not because she had to, but because every morning, when he slipped into that corner booth and took that first cautious bite of warm food, she saw something shift in him, something small, but real. Like maybe he was starting to believe the world wasn't all cold. Like maybe someone seeing him every day, without asking anything in return, was beginning to matter. And for Rachel, that was enough. The first time he didn't show up, Rachel tried not to think too much of it. Maybe he was sick, maybe it was picture day at school, maybe he had to leave early for something. But when the clock hit 7:30 and the booth in the corner stayed empty, a strange quiet settled over her. She still made his plate, just in case. Scrambled eggs, a slice of toast with jam, and the apple juice she'd started keeping cold just for him. She set it down like always, added the folded napkin he never used, and walked away without a word. The plate sat untouched all morning. By 9 the toast was cold and the eggs had hardened around the edges. Kathy passed by, gave a small shake of her head and said under her breath, "Told you." Rachel didn't answer. She just wrapped the plate carefully in foil and took it home with her after her shift. It didn't feel right to toss it. The next day, he didn't come either. Nor the day after that. By the 5th morning, Rachel found herself looking toward the door more often than usual, listening for the creak, watching for that familiar backpack. But it never came. She still made his breakfast though, a smaller portion, something warm, just in case. It became a habit she couldn't quite let go of. Some of the regulars began to notice. "Imaginary friend skip town," one man joked as she placed another untouched plate on the table. Rachel forced a polite smile, but her chest felt tight. Then one afternoon, as she was wiping down the counter, her phone buzzed. A co-worker had sent her a screenshot from a local Facebook group. Someone had taken a photo of the empty booth, with a plate of food still steaming on it, and posted it with the caption, "Rosie's Diner now serving invisible charity cases. I guess playing pretend kindness is trendy now." The comments were worse. Bet she's pocketing the tips and calling it charity. Kids these days just use people. Wake up, lady. This waitress needs to learn that being nice doesn't pay rent. Rachel stared at the screen for a long time, thumb frozen above the screen. It shouldn't have bothered her. She didn't even have a Facebook account. But it did. That night, after she got home, she sat at her tiny kitchen table and stared at the leftover pancakes from that morning, now cold and rubbery in their container. And for the first time since it all began, she wondered if Kathy had been right. Maybe the kid had just been passing through. Maybe she was clinging to something that had never really been hers to carry. She reached into the drawer where she kept the things that still mattered. Photos of her parents, a train ticket from a trip she once took alone, and a small, worn-out envelope her father had sent her from overseas during his last deployment. Inside it was a folded scrap of paper, torn from a notebook, creased and yellowed at the corners. In her father's messy, all-caps handwriting it read, "If you can help without asking why, you're already doing more than most." Rachel held the note for a long time, then folded it back carefully and set it in her apron for the morning. Because deep down she knew you didn't help people because they stayed. You helped because it was right. By the 10th day of his absence, Rachel had stopped pretending she wasn't waiting. She still made the plate every morning, smaller now, just a biscuit and a little side of fruit, but she didn't bring it to the table right away. Instead, she kept it near the kitchen pass window, just in case, just close enough. Most mornings it went untouched. She'd wrap it up, take it home and heat it later even though she never had the appetite. The other waitresses had moved on. Customers no longer asked about the empty booth. Even Kathy had stopped with her comments. But Rachel couldn't let it go. She'd see a backpack in the distance, and her heart would leap, only to sink a second later when she realised it wasn't him. She didn't even know his name. But his silence had carved out space in her life, and now that space felt oddly loud. One afternoon, she caught Mark staring at her as she set the wrapped plate in the back fridge. "You still holding out hope?" he asked, voice low. Rachel shrugged. "It's habit now." Mark leaned on the counter. "You ever think he might have been, using you?" She looked up, met his eyes. "I think he was hungry." Mark didn't reply, just nodded slowly, then went back to counting the cash drawer. That evening, she walked home slower than usual. The sky had turned that soft blue-grey just before rain, and the breeze carried the first breath of autumn. As she passed the school on the corner, she paused by the fence. The playground was empty. She found herself wondering if he'd ever played there. She kept walking. That night, she dug through her cabinet and pulled out an old photo album. The pages were faded, a little sticky from time. Near the back was a picture she hadn't looked at in years, her and her dad standing outside a tiny gas station diner somewhere in Tennessee. He was in uniform. She was holding a styrofoam cup and smiling with her front teeth missing. On the back, in pencil, he'd written, "She smiled because someone bought her cocoa. She didn't know it came from my last $5. Rachel ran her finger over the words. He'd given without telling her, without needing her to know, just like she had with the boy. The next morning, a woman came into the diner who Rachel didn't recognise. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, winded from walking. She looked around like she was searching for someone. "Can I help you?" Rachel asked. The woman hesitated. "I'm looking for the person who used to feed a kid. Quiet one. Skinny. Sat over there." Rachel froze. The woman pulled out her phone and showed a picture. It was blurry, but she recognised the backpack, the posture. That was him. "That's Eli," the woman said. "I'm his aunt. He's been staying with me." Rachel blinked. "Is he okay?" The woman smiled, tired but kind. "He's better now. Things were rough. His mum passed last year. He was staying with a neighbour while I sorted out custody. Guess it didn't go well." Rachel felt her throat tighten. The woman tucked the phone away. "He told me about you. Said there was a lady at a diner who never asked questions. Just made breakfast and left him alone." Rachel didn't know what to say. The woman continued, her voice softer now. "He said it was the only time he felt safe, that someone saw him but didn't try to fix him, just saw him." Rachel looked down at the coffee she'd poured and forgotten to serve. The woman reached into her coat and pulled out a folded envelope. He wrote something, said if I ever found you, I should give you this. Rachel took it with careful hands, unsure whether to open it now or later. He's okay? She asked again, quieter. The woman nodded. He's trying, and he's eating more now. Then, without another word, she turned and left. Rachel stood there for a long time, the envelope warm from the woman's pocket still pressed in her palm. She hadn't even realised her hands were shaking. Rachel didn't open the letter right away. She slipped it into her apron pocket like it was something fragile, something private, something she wasn't quite ready for. The rest of her shift passed in a quiet blur. Coffee refills, checkbooks slid gently across tables, the familiar clatter of dishes from the kitchen. But all the while, she could feel it resting against her side, soft and weightless, but heavier than anything she'd carried in a long time. When the lunch crowd died down, she finally stepped out back behind the diner, into the narrow alley where the trash bins stood and the morning sun barely reached. She sat on the small wooden crate the cooks used during smoke breaks and took a deep breath. Then carefully she unfolded the envelope. The paper inside was lined, torn from a school notebook. The handwriting was crooked, the kind that belonged to someone still learning to write in straight lines. But it was neat, thoughtful, every word pressed into the page like it had been practiced. It read, "Dear Miss Rachel, I didn't know your name until my aunt told me. I just called you the nice lady in my head, the one who didn't ask too much, the one who always brought pancakes, even when I never ordered them. I know I didn't say much. I was scared, not of you, just of everything. When my mum died, things got weird. I didn't want to be taken away from my school, or my house, so I didn't tell anyone. I thought I could make it work. But most days I was hungry, not just for food, but, for someone to see me. I don't think anyone did until you. You didn't ask questions. That helped, because I didn't have answers. You just brought food, and left me alone. But not in the bad way, in the safe way. I liked the oatmeal the best, by the way, the one with brown sugar. Thank you for that. I think if my mum had known someone like you, she might have smiled more. Anyway, I'm okay now. I live with Aunt Nora. She's teaching me how to make grilled cheese. She burns it sometimes. But it's still good. I just wanted you to know. I remember you, and I won't forget. Your friend Eli." Rachel didn't realise she was crying until the ink on the page blurred. She wiped at her cheeks, trying to breathe through it, but the letter shook in her hands. It wasn't fancy. It didn't say anything extraordinary, but it meant everything. It meant the plate of pancakes, the warm juice, the quiet seat by the window. It meant that those mornings, the ones where she'd questioned herself, wondered if she was doing too much or not enough, had mattered to someone, even if he never said a word at the time. She folded the letter slowly, like it deserved care, then slipped it back into the envelope and tucked it into the small notebook she kept in her purse, the one where she jotted down recipes and notes and things she wanted to remember. That night, back at her apartment, Rachel didn't turn on the TV like usual. She just sat by the window, a cup of tea in her hand, the streetlight glowing soft through the blinds. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. Because somewhere out there, a boy who used to sit quietly in her booth now knew he'd been seen, and that was enough. The next morning, Rachel folded Eli's letter and placed it gently in the inside pocket of her purse, right behind her photo of Dad and the old faded grocery receipt she never threw away because he'd once scribbled "proud of you" on the back. She didn't tell anyone about the letter, not even Kathy, but something in her shifted. It was small, invisible maybe, but she felt it. The kind of shift that changes how you carry a plate or refill a coffee mug. The kind that settles into your bones and makes you stand a little taller even if nothing around you looks different. She still worked the same hours, still poured the same weak diner coffee, still listened to the same morning regulars argue about high school football and gas prices. But now, every time she looked at that corner booth, Eli's booth, she didn't feel ache or doubt or regret. She felt steady. Mark noticed. He leaned against the doorway of the kitchen pass one afternoon, watching as she dropped off a plate of biscuits and gravy for an elderly man who always paid in quarters and called her darling. "You good?" he asked. Rachel looked up. "Yeah." He nodded. "You seem different." She gave him a small smile, just thinking. Mark studied her a second longer, then ducked back into the kitchen. That was as far as conversations usually went between them. Later that week, something strange happened. A woman came in with 2 small kids, maybe 5 and 7. They looked tired, a little messy. One of the kids had jelly stains on his shirt. The mum asked for the cheapest thing on the menu and quietly told Rachel, "We're just passing through, didn't know if this place had a kids' deal or not." Rachel didn't hesitate. She brought them scrambled eggs, toast, and a big plate of fruit. When the mum opened her mouth to protest, Rachel leaned down and whispered, "Extra order. Cook messed up." The woman blinked, then looked down, nodded, and said nothing. It felt familiar. The next day, a veteran who often sat near the front door came in, handed Rachel a folded $20 bill and said, "Use this for whoever needs it next. No questions." She didn't know if he'd overheard or if he just knew. By the end of the month, it had become a quiet thing, unspoken, gentle. Sometimes Rachel found $5 bills tucked under salt shakers. Other times, handwritten notes. For the next Eli. Mark never brought it up again, but one evening he handed her a plain envelope with no name. Inside was a printed receipt for a small metal plaque, custom made. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Mark shrugged. "I figured if we're going to have a reserved table for ghosts," he said, "we might as well make it official." When it arrived, the plaque was simple, nothing flashy, just a small rectangle with brushed bronze letters that read, "This seat is for anyone who needs to be seen." Rachel screwed it into the side of the booth herself after closing. No speech, no announcement, just a quiet promise. She didn't know how long it would last, or how many people would even notice, but that wasn't the point. Some things you do not for recognition, but because one day a boy sat at your table with nothing but silence and a book, and you learned that kindness, real kindness, doesn't need a reason. It just needs to show up, word spread slowly, not through headlines or viral posts, just through people. Quiet conversations over coffee, a trucker telling another trucker, a teacher mentioning it to a school counsellor, a mum bringing her kid in for pancakes and whispering, "This is the place I told you about." And still Rachel didn't change much. She didn't start a program or a fundraiser. She didn't make speeches. She didn't add a pay-it-forward jar by the register. It wasn't about that. She just kept doing what she'd always done, one plate at a time, one morning at a time. But the diner began to feel different. The regulars who used to gossip with folded arms and raised brows softened a little. Harold, who once teased her for feeding strays, left a $50 tip one Sunday morning, tucked under his plate like he hoped no one would see. "I didn't ask for change," he mumbled before walking out. Kathy too started showing up a little earlier. She'd prep extra portions by mistake, her version of a quiet offering. She never said much, but she did start bringing in small boxes of cereal and single-serving applesauce to keep under the counter. "Just in case," she'd say with a shrug. One Friday afternoon, a man in a worn military jacket came in alone. He sat at the bar, ordered coffee, and barely touched it. Rachel offered him a sandwich, on the house. He looked up surprised. "Why?" Rachel smiled gently. "Someone once did it for a boy who didn't ask for anything." The man blinked a few times, nodded, and said, "Guess it's my turn then," before pulling out his wallet and leaving enough to cover 3 meals. People started leaving behind small things, a pack of pencils, a pair of mittens, a book with a post-it that read, "For the next reader." Rachel kept them in a shoebox under the register. Nothing fancy, just quiet bits of care for someone who might need them. Then one chilly morning in November, a field trip bus pulled up outside. About 20 third graders tumbled into the diner, full of noise and excitement. Their teacher wrangled them into seats, apologised for the chaos, and asked if they could do hot cocoa and muffins for everyone. Rachel nodded. "Give me 10 minutes. She worked fast, arranging the muffins, stirring the cocoa. The kids laughed and passed sugar packets back and forth. It wasn't peaceful, but it was full of life. One girl sat a little apart from the others. Rachel noticed how she kept glancing at the corner booth, the one with the plaque. "Want to sit there?" Rachel asked gently, crouching beside her. The girl hesitated. "Is it okay? My teacher said it's for someone special." Rachel smiled. "You're special enough." The girl climbed into the booth and ran her fingers over the words. Then turned back and asked, "Miss Rachel, do you know the boy?" Rachel paused. "What boy?" "The one it's for, the one who needed to be seen." Rachel sat down across from her. "I didn't know his name for a long time," she said. "But yeah, I knew him." The girl nodded like that made perfect sense. "My mum says sometimes people forget to look at kids. Like really look." Rachel nodded. "Your mum's right." Later, as the class filed out and the bus pulled away, the little girl turned around at the door and waved. "Thanks for the cocoa." And then more quietly, "Thanks for seeing me." Rachel stood by the window long after the bus disappeared. Because that was the thing about kindness. It didn't echo loudly, it didn't demand attention, but it reached further than anyone realised. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell before Thanksgiving, dusting the diner's windowsills and settling into the cracks of the old parking lot out front. Rachel switched from iced tea to black coffee, pulled her knit cap lower over her ears, and started keeping extra gloves under the counter just in case someone needed them. Business slowed a little during the colder months, like it always did. But Rachel didn't mind the quiet. It gave her space to notice things, like which customers lingered longer than usual, which ones asked for water before even opening the menu. It was one of those mornings, slow and grey, when she saw it. At first, it looked like just another small envelope. Nothing fancy, no address, no stamp. It was tucked under the napkin holder at the corner booth, her booth, Eli's booth. She picked it up slowly, her heart already thudding even before she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of white paper, folded in half. One side had a drawing, rough but careful. A booth, 2 plates, one with pancakes and the other with eggs. A waitress, smiling, a boy with a book in his lap. The other side had just one sentence printed in block letters. I didn't forget. No signature, but she didn't need one. Rachel sat down in the booth without thinking, fingers tracing the edges of the note. She didn't cry this time, not right away. Instead, she smiled, a small, crooked smile that came from deep in her chest, the kind you give when something unexpected touches a piece of you you thought had gone quiet. She folded the note and slid it into her pocket. Later, she'd tape it to the inside of her locker, right next to the grocery receipt from Dad and the folded letter from Eli. For now, she just sat there, let herself feel it. Not the sadness, but the fullness. The quiet kind of joy that doesn't need balloons or banners or big announcements. The kind that whispers, it was worth it. Every early morning, every dollar, every doubt. Later that week, Mark called her into the office again. I've been thinking, he said, adjusting his glasses, about that plaque. Rachel tilted her head. What about it? I want to make another one, he said, for the front door. Rachel blinked. What would it say? He leaned back in his chair, looked up for a second, then said softly, "No one leaves hungry." Rachel didn't speak, just nodded once. And the following Monday, the new sign was up, etched in wood, hung just above the door where anyone could see it as they stepped inside from the cold. No questions, no qualifiers, just a promise. Rachel never found out if Eli had left that note himself or asked someone else to. She never saw him again, not in person anyway. But sometimes when the light hit that booth just right, she could almost picture him there. Quiet, small, book in hand, a plate of pancakes in front of him and the world feeling, if only for a while, a little more bearable. And that was enough. Almost a year to the day since Eli first walked through the door, Rachel found something waiting for her on the counter when she arrived for her morning shift. It wasn't a letter this time. It was a small silver coin, about the size of a quarter, resting next to the register with no note, no envelope, just the coin itself. One side showed a set of simple initials, E.T. The other had been engraved with words so small she had to hold it up to the light to read them. Seen, heard, fed. Rachel stood there for a long time, fingers curled around the coin. She glanced around the empty diner, hoping for a clue. Someone waiting outside, someone watching. But the street was still. The booths were quiet. And yet somehow she felt completely surrounded. Not by noise, not by attention, but by something else. Presence. She slipped the coin into the same pocket where she kept Eli's drawing, the letter, and her dad's note. That pocket had become a kind of second heart, a place where all the reminders lived. That evening, just before closing, a young man in his 20s walked into the diner. Clean hoodie, worn-out jeans, tired eyes. He slid into a booth quietly and stared at the menu like it might fall apart in his hands. Rachel walked over. "Take your time," she said gently. "Kitchen's still open." He looked up. I don't have much." Rachel smiled. "That's okay, we don't let people leave hungry here." He blinked. "Seriously?" She nodded. "Seriously." She brought him a plate of warm pancakes, just like she had with Eli. He said thank you, and she said don't mention it. No questions, no backstory, just food, and the space to be human. As she refilled the napkin holder later that night, Rachel thought about all the quiet stories she would never know. All the kids who might come in tired and guarded, needing just enough to make it through the day. All the people carrying things too heavy for words. She didn't need to save them. She just needed to see them. That was enough. And when the lights finally dimmed, and the front door clicked shut behind her, Rachel paused under the wooden sign above the entrance. No one leaves hungry. She reached into her coat pocket, felt the shape of the silver coin still warm from her hand. Then she walked home under the winter sky, thinking, sometimes the world doesn't need heroes, just a place to sit, a plate of something warm, and someone who notices when you're gone. Sometimes, all it takes is a quiet act of kindness to change someone's entire day. You might never know the impact you made, but they'll remember it. And maybe, like in this story, a plate of pancakes or a simple smile is more powerful than we think. If this story touched you, even just a little, I'd be grateful if you gave it a like, or shared it with someone who might need it today. And if you'd like to hear more quiet stories like this, feel free to subscribe and come back anytime. Thank you for spending your time with me here on Rain Inside. I'll see you again tomorrow night. And if you're waking up now, I hope your day is filled with peace, good people, and maybe a little kindness. Take care.